Multnomah County Board of, there we go, the Multnomah County Board of Commissioners Board Briefing. Audience members, I want to start by asking you to please silence your electronic devices. For those presenting today, please turn your mic on when you begin speaking so that the green light is showing, and off when you've completed your remarks so the red light is showing. For all presenters, please state your name for the record before speaking or responding to questions. Our first board briefing today is an informational briefing on the maltco.us website and digital services. This has been a long-term project that we're making great strides on, so I'm really glad that we have Tracy Massey as well as other folks from DCA IT to talk about this project with us this morning. With that, I will welcome them and turn it over to Tracy. Good morning.
Good morning, Chair and Commissioners. And yes, you'll see the slide up here. This is the Tracy's show. We've got 3 of them on the screen. I sort of wish my mom had not had an E in my name, and then we'd all be the same. But anyway, my name is Tracy Massey, and my pronouns are she and her. I am here today in my capacity as the Department Director for County Assets, overseeing information technology, and I'm pleased to be here with Tracy Strebel, the Senior Digital Product Manager within our IT division, and Tracy Winchung, the founder of Afterbruce. Afterbruce is a Portland-based agency with expertise in praxis-oriented research and dismantling dominant cultures that are inherent in government-led community research. We are very happy to provide the board with an update on the maltco.us website and digital transformation, which is a funded capital project and will also be referenced in our capital plan briefing that follows this one. Next slide, please. All right. So though the specific program was funded in fiscal year 2025 budget cycle, its foundation was established much earlier than that in 2018. This is when our IT division, under my responsibility, initiated a digital accessibility program with 5 long-term desired outcomes identified here. The first was the county's digital resources are universally accessible. 2, employees have meaningful access to the tools to do their work. 3, we meet federal regulations and standards. 4, residents have barrier-free access to county services. And 5, we are nimble in how we respond to technology advances. And we've been working towards all of those long-term outcomes in different ways and different efforts. And today's informational briefing focuses on outward-facing website and digital services transformation linked to outcomes 1, 3, and 4. And gives us a clear picture of the website transformation that's underway. Next slide, please. The website transformation project receives funding through our multi-year one-time only program offers, and the stated goals in this program offer are to lower barriers so people can interact with county services in a way that meets their needs and improve the website's accessibility, relevance, and usability of the county's published content. This is a county-wide initiative led by IT and in partnership with leaders across the entire county, reflecting our collective commitment to enhancing digital public services and delivery. The program leverages a steering committee that has representation from across the county. And lastly, this work aligns with the county's vision, mission, and values. And while this was in progress before the county's strategic plan development, I'm pleased to share that it positively impacts many of the key measures. And it's now I get to turn it over to my colleagues who are very involved in the day-to-day activities and are accountable for moving this work forward. Tracy.
Great. Thanks. Hello, my name is Tracy Strebel, for the record. Our briefing today will highlight these, next slide. Thanks. Our briefing today will highlight these 4 key points. First, we are transforming the website, maltco.us, with direct community input to ensure we build a solution that actually meets the needs. Second, 4 digital barriers are prioritized for improvement. They're all in progress now. These priorities are not just quick fixes. They are large initiatives with solutions that come together at the pace of community trust and understanding. since community input is helping to guide the solutions. Today, I will share progress and a look into the future for each of these. Third, this one-time only program offer builds the capacity for community-centered design. And while the initial investment is one time for this capacity, the website is a permanent operating infrastructure, and it requires ongoing capacity for community engagement, design, testing, and maintenance to remain functional and relevant. And finally, this is the start of a permanent shift in how we maintain our digital connection to the public. Next slide, please. Digital transformations can be tackled in a lot of different ways. I started by asking this overarching question: how might we leverage technology, the county's website, to expand the county's ability to serve more people, especially those communities most vulnerable to systemic inequalities? We asked ourselves and around the county, and ultimately we knew for us to do this right, we needed to be engaging directly with the community and asking them. Here, next slide, thanks. Here is our community-informed approach. These next few slides will share out our public engagement learnings. Our first responsibility is to the public community. Understanding what the public needs not only shapes the digital experience we build for the public, but it also informs how we build the website's back-end system that enables the county's internal staff, roughly 130 people, to organize and publish content in a way that's helpful to the community. Today's presentation does not focus on the staff's needs yet, but they are top of mind and a critical part of our formula for a successful website transformation. Our internal research is in discovery with this now. Lastly, I believe much of the data that you're about to hear reflects the community knowledge that you have. We conducted this engagement to help us learn, validate assumptions, and ensure our next steps are informed by direct public input. And a thank you to Commissioner Singleton and Salome Chimuku for your inputs and engagement so far. Next slide. Okay, moving into community engagement. In May of 2025, we began our community research with Tracy and her team at Afterbruce. At large, we believe that centering communities in this work that are disproportionately impacted by systemic inequalities creates a more resilient and accessible experience for all. This initial research focused on two big learning areas. One, who exactly are we building for when we say disproportionately impacted? And two, what might they need from the county's website to access services and information? Tracy's here today to share this approach, the high-level insights, and Afterbruce's recommendations. This research has directly informed our priorities and implementation plan for this transformation. I'll now turn it over to Tracy. Next slide.
Hi, for the record, I'm Tracy Winchung. Well, I believe many of you are familiar with these practices since this is public. I'll take a quick moment to elaborate and share more about our approach to this work at Afterbruce. So traditional research approaches are primarily extractive, top-down. Researchers are the primary or sole experts who dictate the questions and the methods to collecting and applying data. At Afterbruce, we take a qualitative approach that is praxis-oriented to research and community engagement. This method combines theory into practice and has an explicit goal of positioning systemically marginalized people as collaborators in the solutions or outcomes that will directly impact them. It's research with and by, that's the mentality, which emphasizes community-driven power sharing, participants and partnerships in the research itself. We do this to counter dominant culture narratives. And instead of aligning with those, we position communities as having the inherent capacity and expertise into their own lived experiences rather than being positioned as objects of inquiry. This also requires us to involve the community in multiple aspects, from the planning of the research, the design of the engagement, as well as the implementation of that engagement and research, the evaluation and dissemination of the work itself as well. And this approach isn't intended to only benefit or empower those closest to the issues, but it also sets the expectation that as researchers ourselves and the methods and approaches we use, those are also transformed in the process. That is an explicit agreement that we make in approaching the work with this method. It often takes longer as well because it requires that continued learning, responsiveness, and iteration. Next slide. Thank you. For the county, this looks like engaging with the community early on and then continuously re-engaging throughout multiple large phases and the sub-steps within those to ensure that every step along the way we are accurately interpreting and applying the insights, feedback, and input that is gathered through engagement and research, and as the solutions to the project are designed and built. Next slide, please. With this project, back in May of last year, we first started by conducting insight interviews with over 65 employees across 13 departments at the county. These insight interviews helped our team gain some foundational understanding of how things work at the county, who's being served currently, and how they are being reached today. The insights from these interviews also helped to shape how we approached direct community engagement in the subsequent phases of the work. Next slide. For external community engagement or outside of the county, we contacted, in the beginning of the work, we contacted 92 organizations and completed interviews with 30 CBOs. During that research phase, we also facilitated 10 community listening sessions that were attended by a total of 109 participants. These sessions brought together community members from Black and African American communities, immigrant and refugee, Native and Indigenous, disability, elders, as well as a mix of other audience groups representing diverse lived experiences and access needs that are reflected in the county at large. We also distributed 2 surveys on the topics of trust and services, receiving 262 responses from the 2 surveys. Lastly, several rounds of usability testing were completed in both English and Spanish with a total of 23 participants. These were conducted to get a baseline understanding of barriers to access with the existing website. Next slide, please. So when it comes to identifying community engaged with, answering one of those fundamental questions that Tracy Strebel identified in the beginning, we started by using existing research, community and staff input, and our own expertise to identify specific groups for engagement. This was a practical approach to prioritizing communities that we understand to be most impacted or vulnerable to systemic inequity. And as we continue this work, we know that relying primarily on demographics to inform community engagement can inadvertently reinforce or introduce bias, especially when demographic data currently available to us has its own challenges, may not be as disaggregated as we may need for the engagement that we're seeking to conduct. So to mitigate these potential pitfalls, we're building up a weighted factor model This model is intended to help us identify the audiences that need to be at the center of this work at any point in the work, no matter what part of it we're looking at. And these are also based on factors that can be addressed by the work at hand. Right now, the slide that you see up lists the 8 factors in this model. And each of these, excuse me, each of these 8 factors have a direct impact on how someone can accomplish a task on the county's website. Weighing these factors can help us identify community members and community organizations to partner with on an ongoing basis to ensure that the right community voices are playing a significant part in helping to inform the problem areas and validating the solutions along the way. Next slide, please. So here are some key learnings. This research has continued to show that community partners are absolutely play a vital role in the county's ability to reach and serve community that are disproportionately impacted by systemic inequity. Participants, as we've found so far, mostly bypass direct county engagement with the county due to either low trust, a preference on relying instead on a network of CBOs or community-based organizations, and cultural centers that act as a front door to the county's services. Participants who didn't inherently distrust the county, but do have a distrust of ambiguity, bureaucracy, and also systems that are faceless, so to speak. The community advocates who are supporting these community members are spending a significant amount of time and capacity bridging the gap between how to find and use county services with the people who are in need of those services. These folks are also stitching together information, usually into their own step-by-step guides, and acting as interpreters or translators for the website because it currently is very difficult to use. These challenges for those community advocates are, especially now in our current environment, these challenges are significantly compounded due to significant funding instability and higher need from more community members. Next slide. Based on what we've heard so far, these 4 factors identified here form the biggest barriers to serving more people through community organizations and creating a path for people to eventually self-service through the website. First barrier is lack of support for multiple languages on the website. Second, the current site is organized by the county's internal organizational structure instead of being organized by what people need from Multnomah County, making it really difficult to find services and information. Third, the website search functionality is not reliable, consistently delivering inaccurate results or results cluttered with outdated information. Lastly, the service-related information is very dense. There's a lot of government jargon and content that isn't structured well, making it inaccessible and difficult to use. Next slide. So to wrap this up on my end, we believe Multnomah County has an opportunity to leverage the website transformation to reclaim capacity for partners and staff, to free them to focus on the human-to-human connections that serve more community needs, instead of having to spend time stitching together how to find and use county services. It's an opportunity to begin earning more community trust by offering a county website that feels clear, supportive and empowers more people to get what they need and to feel confident in receiving it through that digital environment. And lastly, this isn't just a tech project, it's really a new standard for civic engagement where community input directly informs, shapes, and builds the tools that community use. So I'll turn it back to Tracy S. to share out the county's response to these findings so far. Next slide.
Thanks, Tracy. Next slide. There we go, thanks. Okay, so the next few slides will cover our response, including the vision for the future and the digital barriers we are focused on improving. I will show you some future state example designs. These are not final designs, but they will give you an idea of what's to come. Next slide. Multnomah County envisions digital as a public service, an always open digital front door to Multnomah County that provides equitable access and opportunity for all. Digital as a public service is the commitment to treat our online digital properties with similar necessity as our bridges and health clinic buildings. It is essential infrastructure through which the county's promise is kept to deliver public services. If this digital front door is locked by jargon or complexity, the service inside remains inaccessible. We must shift from simply building websites to modernizing a vital infrastructure that upholds the ability for community members to reach the services they need. Next slide. What people need and expect from technology has completely changed since the county stood up its website over 15 years ago. Most county services were not designed for the internet, but community members and their advocates expect to easily find, understand, and access public services, programs, and information online. The work ahead is to put Multnomah County's website to work in service of the community, where digital is a public service. Next slide, please. In this transformation, we are working to break down 4 main digital barriers. 1, language access. 2, accessible navigation. 3, relevant search results. And 4, step-by-step guidance or instructions to getting services. I'll review each of these in the next slides, including for each of these, what we heard from community, what's planned for 2026, and visual examples of an improved experience. Next slide, please. We'll start with language access and support. Next slide. Language access showed up as the #1 barrier to using the website. Our site assumes English proficiency. Community advocates are spending a significant time manually translating county information for clients. Next slide. Looking ahead, our goal is that language is not a barrier to accessing public services, and that we offer language access and support across many languages. In 2026, we are leading with Spanish, Vietnamese, Russian, and simplified Chinese. We will continue to bring more languages after that, such as Ukrainian, traditional Chinese, Korean, Arabic, Somali, and many more. We are approaching language translations with both technology translations and human translations. We are using privacy-protected Google Gemini AI models for our technology translations. While this technology is handling the bulk of the translations across our roughly 10,000 web pages, content that informs acute, critical, and timely needs should be written by professional translators or manually reviewed for accuracy. There is always an option for human translations to override technology translations when desired. Next slide. Leading up to last week, the website has had no ability to choose non-English language. Next slide. But as of last week on Wednesday, I'm very pleased to share that Spanish translations are now available on the website. A big shout out to the Web and Digital Experience team who made this happen. This work requires very careful consideration of numerous use cases and technical processes. This is only the beginning, with many more languages to come. With this release of Spanish translations, we have also published a disclaimer page that communicates in plain language to the public about the county's approach to translations and what's ahead for more languages. This page also includes a form for reporting any translations issues. This input is routed directly to the Web and Digital Experience team within IT to be assessed for risk and next steps. Next slide. Looking ahead, this work will continue. We will eventually provide a language switcher at the top of the website for multiple languages, similar to what you see up here on the right. As I mentioned earlier, for 2026, we are leading with Spanish, Vietnamese, Russian, and simplified Chinese, with additional languages to follow in 2027. Next slide. All right, so barrier 2 is accessible website navigation. Next slide. The goal here is to improve how someone can navigate the website to easily find and understand the county's services and information that are relevant to their life. This navigation experience will be optimized for people using assistive technology like a screen reader to get around the website. The information and services on our website today are organized based on the county's organizational structure, like departments. And we heard from community that they really struggle to find services on our website because they don't know the county's internal organization, nor do they understand the government words that are often used to describe the different services and programs. Next slide. Looking ahead, in 2026, we are doing community research to learn how the public thinks about grouping county services and the words they use to describe county services. These insights will allow us to move past a site navigation that's based on the county's internal organization structure and build a website organized by plain language categories that reflect how community experiences their life situation. Next slide. The screenshot on the left is our current website with a long, overwhelming list of the county's services and programs provided alphabetically and using government language. To find what you need, one has to hunt through this list. On the right, the screenshot on the right, you'll see our vision for the future. Instead of hunting through a long list for a specific service or program, users enter a category hub, such as food and housing, or emergency aid, or parenting. These hubs pre-package all the relevant services and information in one place. This approach is a more user-centered way to navigate the website, so that when someone is facing a life situation, the right help is there waiting for them. Next slide. All right, barrier 3 is a relevant website search result. This is about building a search functionality for the website that provides relevant, up-to-date search results and is built for mobile devices. Next slide. We heard from community that the website search is often a dead end, where people get buried in official documents and broken links. Community organizations spend significant time acting as human search engines for clients because the website fails to deliver helpful results. Next slide. The goal is to have a search with high relevance. A new search will save time trying to find the services and information needed. In 2026, a new search technology will be selected for testing. and community input will be used to validate that the solution is meeting the needs before it is fully built out. Next slide. To give you an idea of this problem area, the screenshot on the left is showing an example of what happens when you search for rental help. The top 3 results are help for when it's hot, Well Sky Community Services and Group Trail Help, and Multnomah County Motor Vehicle Rental Tax. On the right is an example of an improved experience. You see a person-centered greeting, "What are you looking for today?" paired with search results that are relevant and timely. Next slide. The last barrier is step-by-step guidance or instructions on website pages for how to get things done to access county services. Next slide. We heard from community that information alone is not access. People quickly get fatigued being trapped in referral loops between 211, the website, and community-based organizations without a single place of truth for how to navigate the steps required to get what they need. Next slide. As we look ahead, the goal is to provide people clear step-by-step instructions on the tasks that need to be completed and the different ways someone can contact the county to get help. For some people, an online application is great, but another person is going to be more comfortable getting help in person or sending an email, while someone else is going to want to go into a clinic. These are all access points to the same service, and the website should be the one-stop source of truth for these options in a clear, structured format that becomes familiar. Next slide. Today, the approach to online service information varies across the site. There are not consistent or familiar ways to learn about services and take action easily. One of the problems is that we have multiple services published on a single page, making the content very dense and difficult to scan to know how to get started. An example, looking at this combined birth and death certificate page, while both of these are managed from the same county department, they are vastly different services for people in very different situations. Publishing a single service per page allows the county to approach people with empathy and reduce cognitive load during a sensitive time. This is core to trauma-informed design. At this time, the county's internal staff do not have the website templates that enable them to publish content in the most accessible and usable ways. Next slide. Okay, so looking ahead, on the left, you will see a service page with step-by-step instructions in plain language for a single service. You will also see a high contrast, bright blue button at the top of the page to help the user know exactly how to take action. And on the right is an example of displaying all the ways someone can contact the county for help when accessing that service, whether that be online, walking into a clinic, by email, or by phone. These are examples of what it means for IT to provide pre-formatted web pages as tools for internal staff to publish content in the way that the community needs. At large, our goal with these digital service pages is to be the connective tissue between community and county service providers, a single source of truth for finding and accessing county services. Next slide. All right, to wrap this up, here is a quick look at the overall high-level timeline for this program offer. These 4 digital barriers are ongoing initiatives that have phases of completion and ongoing support to maintain and constantly improve. Multnomah County is building a system of digital services that need to be easy to find and use. And this takes working closely with community and internal staff to get this right. Our goal is for this system to work for our community, to be scalable, sustainable, effective, efficient. This is not a quick fix, but we will deliver continuous incremental improvements. The work ahead is to put Multnomah County's website to work in service of community, where digital is a public service. I'll leave you with this. Oh, next slide. Thanks. I'll leave you with this parting thought, as Maya Angelou wisely said, do the best you can until you know better. Then when you know better, do better. This quote perfectly encapsulates our approach to transforming digital public services for Multnomah County. This multi-year, one-time only program offer is an investment about doing our absolute best with the information and funding we have, building a meaningful foundation. But like a living, breathing community, our digital services will continue to evolve. We'll learn from our community, from data, and from technology itself. And we will continuously strive to do better long after this initial phase, ensuring our digital presence truly serves the ongoing needs of Multnomah County. Next slide. Thanks.
Thank you so much for that really thorough presentation on all of the website transformation that has been happening and will be happening. It's a very detailed-oriented process, but it's going to have huge impacts for our community, and so I just appreciate you all taking on this work and really moving it forward. I want to commend the team for the thoughtfulness in regard to the deep community engagement as well as staff engagement that happened through this process as well. So with that, we will open it up to the board for questions and any comments, and we'll start with Commissioner Jones-Dickson.
Great, thank you. No comments. Extremely exciting. I appreciate just you walking through the changes and the vision and the goals and the work that's been done up until this point. And as you mentioned, like our partners and even our staff, some of my staff in my office were like human search engines trying to help folks navigate through the system. So it's timely, and again, it's another step in building America's favorite county. How are we, as far as, yes, I have to plug that all the time. What additional funding is needed? I know this is one-time funding. I'm sure, if I can ask that question, I'm supportive of any additional funding. I'll just put that out there. And how do we move faster?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. This is a multi-year project.
Yeah.
This was a $3 million investment the county made and has been funding the work and will continue to fund the work through the next fiscal year. So at this point in time, we don't have an additional ask for the county for this, but the team's really making great progress.
Got it. Well, great. Well, thank you. Thank you again. I don't have any additional questions or comments outside of let's continue to share the good work that we're doing.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Brim-Edwards.
I don't have any questions, but I do want to say that I felt like I must have been part of the focus group because so many of the issues that were highlighted by the community, just as somebody who has, over the years, looked for things with the county, sitting at home, typing something in, it's like, okay, where, I know it's there, but where is it? And,
How many clicks?
Pardon?
So how many clicks?
Yeah. And then also I really like the shift from thinking about departments, like here's what a department provides, because, frankly, even people who deal with the county on a regular basis, it gets so, there's so many acronyms even for the departments that when you shift to even to an acronym, it doesn't necessarily tell you what the department does. So I think that's a very community-centered approach. So really thank you for doing that. I think it's going to make a huge difference because I do think maybe some of the responses of the county, like people wouldn't go to the website but they'd rather go through a partner. It's because it's hard to navigate, but maybe if it's easier to navigate and really reflects sort of the community feedback and input on what would make it better, is that it does become a tool that people would use directly. So thanks for all the work. I love that it's in Spanish and that the other languages are coming online, because I know for many people that will be transformative. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Singleton.
Chair. Thank you, the Tracys. This has been, I just echo, the community engagement work is really impressive, and I appreciate how you're approaching both providers and the folks who are trying to access services, because it's really different experiences and knowledge of the county work. I do have a couple of questions. So with the multiple languages, I think you said during your when you were talking about that we would be fully rolled out on languages in 2027?
Yeah, thanks, Commissioner Singleton. Tracy Struble for the record. We are planning to roll out 5 languages in 2026 and then more languages in 2027. What full means is still to be defined, but that's when we'll be more fully rolled out.
Thank you. And are we using our language limited English proficiency plan on kind of prioritizing how to roll those out?
We are. We aligned with the health department as well as the library to get kind of in alignment with those from a first kind of 5 rollout, and then we'll continue on from there.
Thank you.
Yeah.
The second barrier was about the organization of the work, and it's in your presentation, it talks about research in 2026. Is there an implementation timeline for that, removing those barriers and reorganizing the website?
Yeah. So we will do like I said, we'll do our research in 2026. I don't, at this point, have an implementation timeline after that, because we need to get the information to understand what the problem is that we have to solve exactly. But I can follow up with you on that for sure.
Thank you.
Yeah.
The inaccurate website results were fun slides. And part of what you talk about there is the reclaiming partner capacity. And I just wanted to highlight that that's so critical at a time when we're seeing reductions both within the county but also in provider community. They don't have as much time to spend on this. And my only concern is not a you all concern. I feel like as soon as I say that, Chris Neal pops up. But I have concerns. I was just meeting last night with providers, for example, and they're talking about how complicated it is for them to access county services. And it's not just a website problem. I have an eviction prevention table that also now has at least 4 different eligibility criteria, depending on which program. And so there's a component of this that's also, I might be able to find it on the website, but now I have to navigate 4 systems to understand what I qualify for. And is that part of the work being addressed at the same time? And again, this may not be a you all question, but I worry about attacking just the website and not thinking about the back end that is actually complicated too.
Yeah, hi. We are thinking holistically. The part that's within kind of our domain is the website, but we absolutely know that's the connective tissue to all of these systems. So like the work that Tracy and her team is doing is through that kind of holistic lens, so then we can shepherd those conversations and bring awareness to those issues as well, so that whoever those partners are and those systems are, we're thinking about the whole system while doing kind of the work within our website. Yeah.
Thank you. It makes me curious about the common app that we had and the ability to streamline some of that. And I think I'll be interested to know if that's something that partners found helpful when we had it. Is it something we should really think about differently, as well as aligning? And I'll just say for eviction prevention, for example, there shouldn't be 4 different eligibility criteria. You have 65% AMI, 400% federal poverty level. It's too complicated for people. But it just makes me think of the common app, and what that was trying to address feels in line with what you're saying.
Yes, and I'll just add, our whole IT organization is also involved in paying attention to this and thinking about how this work, sort of the entry front door, ultimately will integrate with other systems down the road to try to address some of that.
Thank you. I think the last piece for me is just a couple of quick questions. Have you done any testing, or is there planned testing with accessibility tools like the free screen readers that people have that I hear don't function super great? Alternative text, have you done some testing with that with the new parts of the website?
Yeah, we have. So some of the work that we did last year, getting my timelines mixed up, was really baselining and understanding of the problems in our current situation, which included testing with screen readers, as well as other kind of audit scans of the site to understand where it falls short from an accessibility perspective. We will continue to have accessibility at the forefront of all of the building that we do, and Tracy and her team are specifically working with communities living with disabilities to understand if the solutions we're building are solving their problems or if they're not, and then tweaking kind of as we go.
Wonderful.
Yeah, and just to add to that, this is Tracy Winchung for the record. In looking at accessibility, something that we want to explore is not just how to meet current latest standards, but to exceed that in sort of complexifying the narrative around what does accessibility mean for different communities. Part of that work will likely look like a brain trust that is interdisciplinary, that brings together leaders from across the community, including the disability community. But for example, what we've heard is guidance that tells us how to formulate a URL, a link to click, for example, may meet the latest accessibility standards, but Auntie or Grandma looks at it and says it doesn't see a click here, and they're not used to accessing or using the internet as frequently in that sort of culture of internet, they may face their own language and other accessibility needs. And so what we want to do is think about how do we balance that across a very disaggregated view of the county, so that we can think about all the different ways it shows up for multiple communities and beyond what we see as a standard or accept as a standard.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that answer. It's how we should be doing this work. So thank you for doing that and stepping into that space. I think just, again, the community engagement has been really powerful, and I am very confident from hearing you that you'll continue the feedback loops and making sure when somebody tells you something, you're reflecting back to them what we did, and they'll see themselves in this website when we get there. So looking forward to seeing the evolution of this. Thank you all.
Thank you. Commissioner Moyer.
Yeah, to follow on to Commissioner Singleton's question, I'm looking at the partners, and maybe that's not an exhaustive list on slide 11. I see Fact Oregon and Community Vision, love them both. I don't see anything for people who are visually impaired or other disability. So I just wanted to make sure that we're thinking about that, including colors, which I've worked for organizations who have done disability rights and in fact found out that their color scheme was incredibly difficult to read. What is the style guide that we use for website content? Is it plain language? Is it, 8th grade? How do we have consistency?
Yeah, hi, Tracy Strebel for the record. Do I have to say that word? So we do have a style guide. We're evolving that style guide based on this work to expand it when we have more information. But yes, it's based on plain language, 8th grade reading level. I'm happy to follow up too and share more But yes, we do have a full style guide that is shared kind of across our content community of editors that are writing and publishing content on the website.
Also, as a screen reader user, we've got a ways to go on it. It's clunky. We're not alone. That's a pretty universal issue. But I am really happy with the intentionality around that. I think that particularly because of the services that the county provides, that is super important, and I appreciate the work that's being done on all of these issues, but particularly accessibility. And I'm just wondering, and this is beyond your department, but it would certainly go through your department, to what degree are we creating ways for people to use the one application or other eligibility forms for potential multiple programs? Because, I think that's one of the things that I hear a lot about is just, I don't even know what I'm eligible for. And filling out 10 different things is incredibly burdensome. So I know that's not on you, because that obviously requires departmental coordination, but you would play a role in how we would do that. So I'm just wondering where we are in those conversations.
Yeah, that's sort of similar to what Commissioner Singleton was referencing. And so through the work and the research on the web, we obviously are very familiar with the variety of forms and applications that our community has to fill out to try to get services. And we are using that information to help inform our IT organization and are sort of looking at different ways of pulling that information together, so it at least is easier to see on the website how to apply for all of that. But the complexities of integrating into a real system where you apply once for 50 programs is pretty complicated. Yep. And we hope to tackle some of that in chunks. There's also all of the systems that we use that are state systems that we don't control. But eventually over time, that stuff will have to get worked out. At least that's my vision. So to answer your question, we are very well aware of that and are looking at it in different pieces.
All right, thank you. Mm-hmm. Thank you. And once again, I just want to offer my thanks for all the work on this. This is, in regards to the question around like the funding and the needs, this is a one-time only but multi-year project. So we were able to use one-time only funds to help fund this work because we knew it would take a longer time. And I feel like in some ways this work has been ongoing almost since the time that I came onto the board. So it's really great to see that we're at a point now where we have done deep engagement with community. We have a path and a plan of where we want to go with this. And now it's just a matter of doing that work in a way that is true to the response that we've had. I'm, optimistic about our chance to use some of the tools that are available to help make sure that our digital access is clear, is accessible, is helpful for people, especially for the critical services that we're providing to the community. And I really appreciate the comments and the questions today about how that front door connects to the rest of our systems and programs in a way that is also meaningful and helpful and all of that. So thank you for that. I think my only question is, who is Bruce? And like, why was that? And why is it after Bruce?
Bruce is an idea or a concept, but I grew up a big fan of Bruce Lee. But Bruce is an idea. It's sort of like, when you existed at a point in time where there aren't spaces for people like you, what do you do in response, and how do you bring others in, and how do you continue that work? So it's really a nod to that kind of legacy and idea to do that continually.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing that. All right, well, we appreciate this. There's a lot more good work to come, but I appreciate the really strong foundations, so we do that. I've also enjoyed looking at our website in Spanish, so that's been great to do too. So thank you all so much. We will now go on to our second and last board briefing for today, which is on the fiscal year 2027 capital plan briefing. So again, Tracy Massey will be here. I want to, as we are getting the rest of the folks up to the dais to do this, I'll just have a couple opening remarks. I want to, first of all, thank the project team on the work that it's taken to get here. The capital planning and prioritization process it's gone through a lot of different iterations, but the continued improvement within the county that started with my time as chair has been, something that we've really tried to focus on and develop year over year. Each year, there are lessons that we learn as we go through this, as we're continuously improving on this. In last year's budget, Budget Note 18 was introduced by me, but built upon the comments that I heard from everyone on the board regarding the equity and connections to our existing facility needs, cost estimations, and identifying areas of board input, and seeing all the projects in one place to understand the impact and the coordination. Also building upon last year, this briefing is in March before we get into the budget season, and this is a new change. And the county staff adjusted their processes and timelines to fit this request. So I want to say thank you for the work in doing that. I think the discussion and feedback that I'm hearing today is going to be helpful as I'm preparing my budget and also as the board begins full deliberations on the budget in April. So just want to thank everyone for that. And with that, Tracy, I will turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Until we get our deck up here. All right. Well, hello again, Chair and Commissioners. I'm happy to be here with you, providing a briefing on the requested 2027 capital plan. I'm Tracy Massey, and I'm here in my two roles at this point in time, as Interim Deputy Chief Operating Officer and as the DCA Director. The capital plan process is the responsibility of the Department of County Management, so that's the Interim Deputy COO portion of for today. I'm joined by Eric Ariano, our Chief Financial Officer, Dan Zalko, our Director of Facilities and Property Management, and Sim Ogle, our Chief Information Officer. I do want to give a shout out to Mary Weiner, who was instrumental in pulling this plan together this year. So she's in the audience there. All right, next slide, please. So here's a quick look at our agenda for the next while. I will briefly summarize the capital planning process, highlighting updates related to the budget note that the chair noted. We'll review the 2027 proposed capital projects, or the major initiatives or investments as they're called, and discuss the funding strategies. We do have some slides included in the appendix that includes board involvement tracking and our debt financing analysis. Next slide, please. All right, so let's begin with an overview of the capital planning process in year 3 of its development. Next slide. So Budget Note 18, which came out as part of the fiscal year 2026 budget process, the chair directed us to provide a plan that tracks all capital projects over specific thresholds: $500,000 for IT, $1 million for facilities and transportation, highlights the equity impacts, and refines the prioritization process, and really identifies the external funding sources as well as internal, and clearly defines the board's responsibilities and engagements. We'll see many of those updates in the slides today. Some of those will be reflected, though more clearly, in the capital plan summary report, a key deliverable of this process that you will receive a little later this year after the board's decisions are adopted. Next slide, please. Okay, so there are multiple pieces or components to the overall capital plan, and today we are focused on the major capital investments, the column that's highlighted in blue, which are guided by the capital administrative procedure, CAP 1, as we refer to it. The full capital plan does include our facilities capital improvement investments to preserve our existing assets, our IT asset replacement funds that replace hardware infrastructure. The library capital bond has its own special piece here since it's so large, and the Department of Community Services, their transportation capital improvement plans. But again, today, for now, we're focusing on the first one. Next slide, please. So here's a graphic representation of the cycle, just to refresh, and the next few slides will go into a bit more detail, but we begin at the sort of the top of at the noon hour at the top, which begins in October, with the capital groups across the county collecting feedback and identifying projects. Moving around the graphic, the capital project information forms, you hear us talk about CPIFs, county jargon, but it's what we use to help us complete this project. The projects are prioritized by capital groups in November and December. Then in December, the Capital Planning Steering Committee reviews and adjusts the lists while the CFO's office develops potential funding scenarios. Recommendations are made to the chair in January and then ultimately inform the executive budget through the process of February to June to July when you all adopt the budget. Next slide, please. So highlighting the first couple of boxes, facilities and property management, information technology, and transportation work with stakeholders across the county to review and refine existing capital projects and requests, develop new ones based on departmental and board priorities, such as Walnut Park as an example. We have projects that are on the long-term list that we review to see if they are ready to move forward in the process. Next slide. All right, so the capital project information forms, or CPIFs, are essential in detailing the project timelines and anticipated 5-year spend. Critically, each CPIF includes the equity matrix, which is a score from 0 to 100. The matrix addresses safety and security questions, equity and the impact on the project, as well as the urgency of new projects and the impact of pausing existing projects. So we evaluate on and score on these criteria, and that rolls up into a total score. Next slide, please. In November and December, the capital groups prioritize their projects based on those things: urgency, equity, stakeholder needs, and the Capital Planning Steering Committee then prioritizes the projects together, placing them into 4 different tiers. This was a new step this year, and then the CFO's office develops the funding scenarios. Next slide, please. In January, the steering committee presents the tiered recommendations and funding scenarios to the chair, and this briefing is presented to the board. And the chair finalizes her recommendations, which then feed directly into the broader budgeting process. Next slide. Okay, so we're going to go into the actual projects proposed for 2027. But first up, next slide, please. A quick refresher on the projects that receive funding in 2026, such as the Justice Center bus duct replacement and the Sobering Crisis Stabilization Center. We also have continuing projects that did not receive new funding in 2026, like animal services and the radio system replacement. We have several projects that will be completed in this fiscal year. We're showing this slide just to demonstrate that capital projects tend to be multi-year investments, and that the capital plan is rolling. Next slide, please. Okay, so this year, turning to 2027 planning, we received 28 project submissions requesting over $197 million in additional county funding from fiscal year 27 through 2031. This includes 9 new capital requests totaling $86 million over 5 years and 19 continuing projects. Of those 19, 10 10 of those continuing projects required $111 million in additional funding, sort of highlighting the considerable gap in what we have and what's requested. Next slide, please. Okay, so the first grouping is our priority one, and just to orient on the slide, which you'll see this format in several slides forward, the projects are numbered for easy reference, and the total estimated column represents the total project cost. The next column is the funding needed for 2027 alone, and the last column is the equity matrix scoring. There are 11 priority projects in this grouping, and all of the projects except for one, the vector control program, is continuing. That one is new. These projects align with the county's priorities and our emerging or immediate needs. New funding requirements for Tier 1 alone, as you can see, are $19.9 million, and we'll provide more detail on each on the next slides. All right, next slide, please. All right, so the first one on here is the Department of Community Services continuing ADA improvement project, and this is to make their sidewalks our sidewalks ADA compliant. As Commissioner Moyer and Commissioner Brim Edwards co-sponsored a budget note this year for a 10-year funding plan, which DCS presented earlier this year. The funding request here aligns with that plan, and I'll turn things now over to Dan.
Thank you, Tracy. Good afternoon, Chair Vega-Peterson and Commissioners. My name is Dan Zalko, Division Director for Facilities and Property Management. The next slide, please. The electrical bus duct system at the Justice Center, a project you all are very familiar with, as it's been ongoing for the last few years and still has a few more years as well. This is a project where the City of Portland is contributing about 40% of the project costs based on their occupancy. Next year, we're anticipating needing an additional $2.5 million of county funds. About $4.2 million of need will remain after that. In this project, we have used a bit more contingency than we are comfortable with at this point in the project, and we're working hard to contain costs in order for this project to not go over budget. Next slide, please. So I will be joining you this Thursday along with my health department colleagues for a long discussion about the Sobering Crisis and Stabilization Center. If the board approves proceeding with construction on Thursday, we anticipate construction starting in April. Project costs you see here of $36 million does include the acquisition costs and associated due diligence. The project cost for the renovation, which you'll see in a good bit of detail on Thursday, is $29.8 million. And after receiving, which is the same cost that you all saw a year ago when you approved proceeding with design. After receiving bids from dozens of subcontractors last month, we do have high confidence in this budget number. $12.3 million in county funds is needed in fiscal year 2027, with an additional $1.8 million needed the year after that. Next slide, please. The $4.1 million Harrison Community Village project is wrapping up. We have high confidence in this budget number. It's going to be completed this spring, and no additional funds are needed for the project. Next slide, please. Also continuing on is the $6.5 million Rockwood Community Health Center renovation, where construction has started, and we do have high confidence in that budget number as well. We'll be halfway through construction this summer and wrap up in the middle of next fiscal year. No additional funds are needed for this project. Next slide, please. Also wrapping up soon is the $3 million radio system replacement project, expected to be completed this summer. We have high confidence we will be within budget for this project, and no additional funds are needed in the next fiscal year. Next slide, please. So now for a new project. The $14 million vector control project is new for FY27. The City of Portland has requested that we exit a lease space at their Columbia wastewater treatment plant property, which we've been at for over 50 years. The proposed budget includes $8 million in county funds and $6 million in funds from the Bureau of Environmental Services, based on an agreement that we have with them. The project includes the acquisition of a property with a building on it, renovation of the building, and the move of the program to a new location. If this project proceeds, we will be before you in early FY 2027 seeking your approval for the project. Although this budget is a rough estimate, based on what we know thus far about potential properties, we believe that the final budget will end up being lower than what you see here. Next slide, please, and I'll now turn it over to Sim.
Thank you, Dan. Good morning, board and chair. It's nice to see you. My name is Sim Ogle. I am the Chief Information Officer, and my pronouns are he, him. The first slide I'm going to talk about is the continuing HMIS implementation project. As you know, it's replacing the 3 Portland metro counties and their continuums of care, the current outdated system WellSky, with a new system called BitFocus Clarity. This transition, which is expected to be complete by May 2027, will result in a modern, functional, and user-friendly system. The new HMIS will enhance service delivery coordination, data integration, analytics, and program performance and reporting. Funding for this initiative comes from the Supportive Housing Services Measure and the Regional Investment Fund. Next slide, please. Prior to this briefing, the board received a presentation on the website transformation program. This program will maintain its focus on the key areas of accessible site navigation, multi-language access, building on the very exciting launch of Spanish language translations last week, and provide actionable step-by-step guidance for services. Next slide, please. In fiscal year 2027, IT will partner with the Department of County Human Services to enhance the BridgeCare platform for the Preschool for All Early Learning Technology Initiative. This project will involve scoping the work to implement a solution that offers improved family notifications and support for students and their enrolled families. Next slide, please. Over the past year, IT and DCHS staff have finalized a significant strategic assessment of the technology systems within DCHS. This project is designed to support a key outcome of that assessment, researching, identifying, and implementing a comprehensive software solution to enable more efficient interdivisional workflows and case management. Next slide, please. And I'll turn this back to Dan.
Thank you, Sim. All right, moving to priority tier number 2, important projects that are early in their life. We have 3 more continuing projects to share with you. Next slide, please. First is the DCJ East Campus South Building renovation project. Now, conceptual design and programming work has been done for the proposed $19 million project and is now ready to move forward to the next phase, which would be to seek your approval through the FAC1 administrative procedure to proceed with formal design. No additional money is being requested for FY 2027, as there is enough money already to complete design. If this project were to proceed, most of the funding would be needed in FY 2028 during construction. This is a conceptual estimate, however, it is at the high end of a range that spanned between 15 and 19 million. Next slide, please. Also continuing is programming and conceptual design work for a potential new animal services facility, which will continue into the next fiscal year and include input from a community design advisory committee chaired by Commissioner Brim Edwards, which met for its first time last month. Next slide, please. At Walnut Park, the contract with a development partner is under negotiation, and the work by the partner will include a site analysis, programming, and conceptual design work that will continue into next fiscal year. It will also include potential development scenarios for county consideration. $250,000 of additional funds are being requested in FY 27 to support that work. All right, I'll now turn it back over to Tracy.
Thanks, Dan. Next slide, please. Okay, so here's priority tier number 3, which contains projects that are important, may have a lower urgency, or be further out in their planning timeline. I do want to note an error on this slide. Under the new funding column for the Hanson Complex, number 15 on this page, we should have included the $4.3 million as a request for 2027, and the subtotal at the bottom should read about 4.8. Projects numbers 16, 17, 18, and 20 are all projects that are continuing and underway. The number 18 on here, the downtown real estate evaluation, is in analysis, and the project team is updating space requirements for the programs downtown. And we do want to note that with the current real estate market in downtown, leasing space appears more advantageous than buying. At this point in time, we're not requesting funds for 2027. The analysis will continue, and requests will come forward from that. Projects number 21 and 23 are new to the list and are in analysis and scoping right now. Number 21 comes from Commissioner Jones-Dixon's budget note in this last year, and we would expect a funding request in fiscal year 2028, 29 for both of those. Next slide, please. Okay, and then finally, priority tier number 4 includes projects that have less immediate need for funding, or we may not have scoped them well enough, and a placeholder has been created, such as number 28 for the Mid-County Health Center replacement. Also, item 24, the profit center should reflect $7 million that also came out of the initial capital planning information form request. So the total here would be adjusted as well to reflect about $12 million. The Department of Community Services, I do want to call out, number 25, has requested funding for a system replacement for the tool they use in their animal shelter. And there are 2 critical network infrastructure and security upgrade projects, 26 and 27, that are in analysis, and you would expect to see them in future years as part of the capital plan request. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Eric for funding scenarios.
Yeah, thanks, Tracy. Good morning, Chair and Commissioners. For the record, Eric Ariano, Chief Financial Officer. And if you want to move to the next slide. What I'm going to go through is some funding considerations now that you've kind of heard a summary of all the projects that we have planned for, at least the updates going into the next budget cycle based on the different priority levels. What I kind of want to share is some funding scenario considerations, but I am going to spend some time doing some little orientation on how we fund capital, some considerations in terms of potential debt instruments that we can use, and then some debt capacity considerations, and then I'll dive into the tables. And going through those kind of how we fund things and some debt options doesn't necessarily mean that I'm encouraging the board to finance major capital with debt. It's just to show you our options, and I'll continue to do that every year as we give updates. So next slide. And one other thing that I just want to orient, as I go through the tables later on, there might be some differences overall in terms of what the team shared in terms of the projects, because as we went through the funding scenarios, I adjusted some assumptions, and I'll make sure to note those as I go through it. Most everything is aligned, but I did want to note that in case you do any math up there and you say, hey, this is off, that's because of that. So I'll make sure to note those things. So how do we fund capital? I shared this last year. There's really 2 buckets. It's pay-as-you-go. It's a standard the county's held for many years, and then there's a pay-and-use. The pay-as-you-go really funds kind of routine maintenance, repairs, and in some cases, some major capital. We have fees that we charge occupants through facilities rates that help support our capital improvement fund and our asset preservation fund. Our asset preservation fund is more meant for newer buildings, and our CIP for a little bit older buildings. We also charge IT users a fee as well to create support for IT asset replacement. And then in our financial and budget policies, we have that provision that says that from one-time only funds, 50% can be used for, may be used for capital investments, whether facilities or IT. I did want to know, I always emphasize that because I really like that particular provision that was added to our policies over a decade ago, is it really helps to support our ongoing capital needs, but also reduces the amount of potential debt the county would have to go after to fund the potential debt. And so I did a review a couple years ago of kind of the average one-time only money that goes to capital. and it was roughly between 8 to 10 million on average. And it doesn't include recent years. But one of the things that I noted there is that if we were to take that number and say we would finance that 10 million, for example, it would create around like 500,000 in interest annually. And if you did over a 20-year term, it's like $6 million. So again, the board's leadership around having this provision in there and using this money to fund capital, again, really supports our needs, but also minimizes costs that we're avoiding in terms of debt issuance. In the DCS and for transportation, we have external funds, gas tax, state revenue sharing, and our vehicle registration fee, which funds our bridges. So pay-as-you-go is really meant for major capital where we can't fund it ourselves entirely. And so this tends to be major capital construction, could include acquisition and major improvements. These types of works tend to be, asset tends to have a longer useful life between 20 and 30 years. And again, even though it's meant for major capital, it can include soft costs, which is planning and design. This space is more around debt issuance. I do want to note that historically when the county issues debt, we always have a combination of other resources with that debt. And a couple of examples of that are our courthouse. When we issued debt for the courthouse, we had state funding that supported that capital project. With the Selwood Bridge, we had federal funds that supported that project as well, in addition to debt issuance. So again, historically, we've tried to maximize outside resources in combination with debt to reduce whatever that debt amount was. And again, debt cannot be used for to support operations. Just wanted to note that. So next slide. So the debt instruments that we have available, and these are the most common ones. There's definitely more out there, but these are the ones that we most traditionally use. Our general obligation bonds, those are bonds that requests that have to be approved by the voters, and that's because it essentially creates a new revenue source, a new levy for the term of the debt to retire the debt. So in this particular case, if we issue general obligation bonds, it's not putting a burden on the general fund because it's creating a new revenue source for that term. Those are also have to be approved by the board, but the key piece here is that they have to be approved by the voters. Revenue bonds, the county hasn't done a revenue bond in a very, very long time, but revenue bonds are essentially when you have a dedicated revenue source that is used to retire that debt. A couple of good examples of that is toll revenue or a utility fee that's just dedicated to that issue, to retiring that debt. When we actually go out for ratings, they actually rate the revenue source to make sure that it could back up the debt service. But again, the county hasn't issued revenue bonds in a very long time. The next item is a full faith and credit bond. Those are the more traditional ones that we do, and the majority of our outstanding debt is in full faith and credit. This does not create a new revenue source. It does not have to be approved by the voters. It just has to be approved by the county board. It essentially is backed up by our taxing authority of full faith and credit to back up the debt service. And so just to give you a ballpark is when from the time the board makes a decision on moving forward with the debt issuance as a full faith and credit, from the time we decide to the completion, close out, and receiving the funds, it takes about 3 months in general to go through the process. Obviously, we have debt limits around debt issuance, and those are around debt that's supported by the general fund, and I'll talk about that a little bit later in a separate slide. And then we also have other options for financing a traditional bank loan. Those tend to have a lower cost of issuance because they're easier to do, but they tend to be shorter term, 10 years or less in terms of the term for bank loans. We also could do a line of credit with the bank. We've done this in the past, for example, for our courthouse, where we knew we were going to issue debt, but we weren't quite ready to issue debt. And so we opened up a line of credit, and we used some of that line of credit, and then when we issued the debt, we paid off the line of credit. A loan and a line of credit also have to be approved by the board. Any debt issuance has to be approved by the board prior to any action. And then obviously we have interfund loans. And then the last thing there is just more for reference. There's this conduit debt out there. We actually have a hospital facilities authority, but if there's a third party that wants to issue debt and they want to issue tax exempt debt because it's cheaper. They couldn't go through a conduit debt process, which the state establishes, where you can issue debt through a conduit local government, either through the state or local government, where you can do tax-exempt bonds for hospital facilities or for education or for, in some cases, housing development. And what the advantage here is, again, for the third party is that they can do tax-exempt bonds, it's cheaper. And for the conduit, it doesn't actually create an obligation or a liability, but allows to support those local third parties. They tend to be nonprofits that do this. So the county has a hospital facilities authority, and we've historically done it for retirement homes, retirement facilities where we've actually been a conduit of debt. So I just wanted to reference that. So next slide, please. So some external and internal debt limits. I shared this last year. These are statutory requirements, looking from left to right and looking at the top section. There's debt limits the state says. They're ridiculously high. This is more just a reference that we're well below that. For GO bonds, it's 2% of real market value. They're $4.2 billion, and then for full faith and credits, 1% of real market value, which is $2.1 billion. And to the right of that, you can see how much we've used. And then to the right of that, you can see how much is available. Again, we're well below that threshold. Just wanted to reference that in terms of capacity. Then the section below shows internal county policy debt limits. There is no debt limits on general obligation bonds, and that's because when we issue general obligation bonds, we essentially created a new levy, a new revenue source to pay off that debt. But we do have restrictions on full faith and credit, debt issuance, or any debt that our outstanding debt for a year that's supported by general fund cannot exceed 5% of budgeted general fund revenues. And I'll go to the next slide because I'll show a visual of that that's a little bit better. So again, our annual debt service supported by general fund cannot exceed 5% of budgeted general fund revenues. So you can see in that table there, our total fiscal year 26 revenues, 5% of that's 37.6 minus 9.3 million. That's the amount that we have general fund supporting outstanding debt. And then 28.3 is what we have available. And then if we're to amortize that over 20 years based on a 5.5% interest rate, we could issue debt up to $340 million. That does not mean I'm saying we should. It's just more of what we have available, well below our threshold. And what I really want to yeah. What I also want to just highlight here is that as Christian and Jeff have shared, we're in a very tough constrained budget cycle. And right there, we only have 9.3 million of debt that's supported by the general fund. So even in a time of tough constraints with such a low debt level, it could be much worse, but because of smart planning by this board in terms of funding major capital, we really minimized it. So I couldn't take the opportunity to highlight that, but it's really important. It's also just a testament to this board. And I think of that policy, we're only about 25% of that policy. So next slide. So I am going to go through 4 slides of the tables. I do want to give credit to Mary Weiner back there because I initially did the tables and they were very unreadable. So she improved them a lot. And I also noticed too that as I go through these tiers, they're essentially the priority level. And I'm hearing Chris back there saying, please align the terminology, but I did not align the terminology there, but I did want to note that too. But Chris turned it off. No, so this is kind of going through the funding scenarios. And a couple things here that I want to note and highlight is that this is meant to give kind of a 5-year window in terms of our, go back up, to our capital investments. This is not reflective of the total cost of the projects that the team has gone through. This is giving you kind of a 5-year window. And I think it's important here as we make investments that we're identifying, as we make these investments, what potential commitment we're making over the long term. And these projects are different stages, right? So some are just started, some are kind of midpoint, some are almost done. And so it's important that we kind of see where, as we're making these investments, because a lot of the projects we seed fund over time, but it's also it's important to understand when we need to have an off-ramp and when that off-ramp is. And so it's important to kind of see this visual for these major capital projects. And so, and this is reflective of all projects and requests, no matter what the request is in terms of funding source, whether it's general fund or it's outside. So looking from left to right, it's the project description, the total estimated project cost, the total funding to date, and then in blue, it's the next 5 years. So the 27 ask, and then the potential ask over the next 4 years for each of those projects. I'm not going to go through these in much detail, but I did want to highlight a couple because I was really focusing on that tier 1, tier 2 priority level. And obviously, as the teams talked about, the bus duct is a major priority. We're pretty far deep on that project, and it's a partnership with the City of Portland. There's about a $2.5 million ask for 27, and then a total about $6.7 million over the next couple years. Then there's a sobering center. Dan talked about the overall cost of the project, and then we did get state funding. About 21.2 was allocated to the permanent center. We got a total of 25 million, but 3.8 went to the coordinated pathway center. So the 21.2 went to a permanent center. And so you can see the request over the next 2 years. I think the one thing I want to note here is that I think I sent a memo a couple weeks ago and prior to the FAC 1 this week, where it showed that we have about a deficit of 14.2 million for the sobering center. If you did the math right there, you'd see a slight difference. It's because currently there's a underspend in the coordinated pathway center of about 556,000. We anticipate moving that to the permanent center, which support that total project and what we need to close the gap. So that gets you to your 14.2 million. Then there's the ADA project. Tracy talked about how this aligns up with the DCA's presentation a few months ago around the needs over the next 5 years. This is obviously a project that's much longer than 5 years, but this reflects just the 5 years. So I'll wait for it to come back up. Thank you. Okay, and then vector control. The one thing I want to note here, I think Dan talked about it, is there's a $8 million ask over the next 2 years. Dan referenced that the first year could be pushed out to 28, where the whole amount would be in 28. Just wanted to note that. For the animal services facility project, we've made the assumption right now in terms of a funding plan, is that if we were to move forward with this project, that we'd issue debt in 2028 or 29, either a general obligation bond or a full faith and credit issue. I know there's a lot of work that has to be done around the potential site, the scale, the design, overall cost, and the board prioritizing that project. But right now, if we were to move forward with that, that'd be the time frame where we need to issue debt, because I think that's based on the current schedule. That's when we start construction. And so right now we have money available at 3.5 million that is from the pig farm sale that can continue to support planning and design work. Then DCJ East Campus, about 17 million over the next 3 years. And then we have the Walnut Park, $250,000 ask. I will want to note what the Walnut Park amounts on this sheet is it does not include a potential overall estimate for the project. And we left it to be determined because there's a lot of work to determine what that could be. I didn't want to, I think it's too early to show what that would be, but fully funded by supportive housing dollars. And then a couple of projects that have existing funding that won't be asking for additional, just using existing dollars. And then there's a preschool project that is asking for some money, but that will be preschool for all dollars. So at the very bottom to the right, there's a table there, and that's your estimated overall cost over the next 5 years. That total, 22.9, all the way out to fiscal year 31 of 3.7 million. Then below that is kind of a potential scenario on funding these projects. And looking at the column of 2027, we estimate that we could potentially fund about 22.2 million for the ask for 27. That's because there's preschool funding a portion of it, the supportive housing dollars funding the HMIS system, and then I talked about how the Coordinated Pathway Center can move over some underspend of 556,000, and then we might have some asset preservation and CIP funds that might be able to contribute to some of these projects. And then we have the one-time only estimate on what can be used for capital. That's based on Christian and Jeff's forecast that could be available to the board. Potentially, it could go down. I mean, there's going to be an update next week, but for now, that's our number. And so that gets you to a potential underfunded of 741,000 overall, based on the asks for 27 of Tier 1, Tier 2. And I will emphasize a note that the vector control project, I noted that ask for 3.5 million could be pushed out to 28. But in the scenario, it assumes that we will have that 3.5 million in 27. And then looking to the right of that from 28 to 31, you can see the underfunded of 22.3, 4.7, 796, and 753,000. In this scenario, I assume that the one-time only that's available for capital will be about $3 million annually. That's a conservative estimate. It'll most likely be higher than that. But as Christian's talked about, that continues to shrink. It's been shrinking, and I expect it to continue to shrink. And so we're just being as conservative as possible here to kind of reflect kind of where we're at with this. I will note that historically, over a 5-year window, with major capital, when we have a deficit around 30 million, we've been able to historically fund pay-as-you-go. We find ways to fund without doing a major debt issuance in that $30 million window. If it gets above that, we've usually had to issue debt. That doesn't mean in this case we won't do that. It's just historically we've been able to fund those things over 5-year windows. So next slide. So now this is Tier 3, Tier 4, which is our priority levels 3, and 4. I'll go through these pretty quickly. A couple things that are different that I was noting is that for the Hanson complex deconstruction, I assume that there'll be no ask for 27, and that we don't do that decommissioning or deconstruction in the scenario. Also for the profit center, I'm pushing out the assumption of the project starting into 28 versus 27, which is a difference from what was submitted. And then I think everything else aligns. So go to the next slide. And this is, again, continuation of Tier 3, Tier 4 projects. A lot of these are IT projects. A couple that I want to note here is that we have the electronic health records transformation project of 4.2 million. We assume the FQHC would cover that project or majority of those dollars for that project. But in this scenario, looking at the bottom table again, this is an addition to Tier 1, Tier 2. This is not a continuation. This is in addition. And so again, looking from left to right, we're underfunded at 5.7 million in 27, all the way out to 31, a $31 million underfunded, the total of 129 million underfunded, including Tier 3 and Tier 4. So I think the key piece here is that that I want to highlight that's obvious and that I kind of shared last year is that there's a lot of needs that we have in terms of capital, but we don't have the resources to fund every priority. And it's important that we prioritize our key projects and focus on those and find ways to build funding plans for those. We just don't have, at least existing dollars don't have the resources. So either we make further cuts or we find new revenue sources that can help support these potential projects, or we consider debt issuance in some form or fashion. Obviously, whether it's general obligation or it's a full faith and credit. But again, with debt issuance, that's not general obligation bonds. It creates more costs because you're paying interest on that debt. And you're already in a tough budget cycle. It's tough to do. So So I think that's it for the tables that I wanted to share. So I'm going to put it back to Tracy.
Thank you, Eric. Next slide, please. And you can skip to the next one. All right, so just really quickly, sort of where we are in next steps. We have our briefing today. As Dan said, we have the FAC 1 for the Sobering Center on Thursday. We will be presenting the capital budget in May, and it will have all of the different components in it, and it will reflect the chair's executive budget. And then you all will be evaluating the projects and the proposed funding, and will ultimately result in an adopted budget. We will prepare the capital plan summary report that includes everything for the year. The final of that will be produced in the summer. And then what we'd like to do in the fall is come back with just a briefing on our capital projects and give sort of a status update. We haven't done that in quite a long time outside of the specific budget process. And so with that, I think we're ready for questions.
All right, thank you all for, again, a really detailed presentation that, yes, Tracy Massey, all day. And really, you know, so much to think about, both for this upcoming budget year, but also for future years and what these means and how, you know, these projects, which I think are all important in different ways, but thinking about our resources to do them. So I want to open it up to the board for questions. We'll start with Commissioner Brim-Edwards.
Thank you. Appreciate you bringing this forward. I had sponsored this budget note with the chair. Just when I got to the county, our capital needs were many, and they were all in different places. So having them sort of tiered out, organized, and then like what our various tools are to be able to think about not just, although the budget note was specific to FY27, just think about the long-range planning and what tools we have in order to move the project forward. And I look at this in many ways as sort of a two-part, there's two benefits to this. One, we get some important infrastructure funded and built. And then second, that activity also creates economic activity for the trades who are doing the work, but also whatever, if it's new operations or enhanced, the activity related to that. So really appreciate the presentation. Just an overall note, and this is for the future, and I think I mentioned it in the pre-brief. I'd love to see like just one addition. I know it was exhaustive, so when you said that's all, it's like that, it was a lot. But I feel like one of the things that I'm thinking about just longer term are these just like sort of the mega projects. It seems like we have a lot of projects and they add up to a lot of money, but the sort of mega projects, whether it's the jail replacement, which is of course in the grand jury's corrections report, and the sheriff has noted the current facilities are, it's hard to modernize, and actually they're probably going to need a whole new jail. So that's one thing. Of course, the earthquake-ready Burnside Bridge. Did I miss was the elections building in here?
Commissioner Brim-Edwards, it wasn't in this presentation, but it is similar to the jail on our long-term ideas list.
Okay, I guess I'd love to get whatever that, so I can just put it all together, because I think the scope of it is sometimes if we like are figuring out how to pay things for the short term, then we're some of these other projects having a longer runway, or like we need to move them up. It'd be helpful. And then I'm assuming the second phase of the library is also on that list?
An aspect of it is, there's still a lot of work going on to assess what that would be, but there are aspects of it that are on that long-term ideas list.
So I'd love to get that added together again. I know this is FY27, but just also, I think decisions we make this next year, we also want to be thinking, how do we set up ourselves up for the future? I'm going to mention a District 3 priority for me is to, and for this is discussion heading into FY '27, not necessarily a project to fund, because it's not yet ready, but I've heard from staff and also clients who use the Mid-County Health Center, Health Care Center, that it's either needs a renovation and expansion or a move, so just want to highlight that. And then, again, I really appreciate all the, looking at the different ways that we can fund things, so it's great information for us to have. I did have a question on slide 22, which is the HMIS implementation. So the full implementation, it looks like, is May of 2027. Maybe somebody can summarize, like, what's the functionality we have now and the gap between what we have now and what we'd have in May 2027? And maybe just at a high level, if somebody can answer this now, but I'd like a more detailed answer just as a follow-up after the meeting.
Thank you. Yeah, we'll get that to you for sure. That's a good question.
Is there like a high-level answer now, or?
You know, I don't think I could do it justice right now. I put some notes in what I talked about already, but it's probably not detailed enough for what you're actually asking, Commissioner Brim-Edwards. So how about I have the team respond to you directly with a more detailed response?
That's fine.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
We'll provide it for everybody.
Appreciate that. Just as I know there's a lot of conversation about our data and what it means, and you know, other ways of measuring it that come up with different numbers, and it would be great to understand exactly where we are in the process of getting to our completed implemented system. And then this is just a curiosity. On slide 8, you have there's the equity matrix. And was this the matrix that got you to the different tiers?
Not exactly. Not exactly. The tiers were more kind of a conceptual conversation about how to organize, how to group the projects. And I would say our tiers are more based on urgency and/or if projects are already underway and do they remain a priority. How the equity matrix was used was sort of evaluating the impact in those different categories that completing the work would have, and we reflected on it and used it in our decision-making in terms of grouping them together within our divisions, right? Different groups. So within IT, within facilities.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's helpful. And then, and this is just how I was thinking, because when I was looking at there's the general that's 40 points, and most of it is like, is there something, if we don't do this, will something bad happen? Or have a bad outcome?
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, you know, shifting from a more reactive to a more proactive would be like, what's the positive thing we get out of, like, you know, how would our work be more efficient? How would we better serve the community? How do we get better outcomes? And then by the time I got over to the right-hand column, there is the impact, and I think that's where it's captured, but it seemed to be more weighted, and I know we obviously want to avoid bad things from happening, but I'm also thinking is if we shift it, like, how do we get ahead of some of these things? So I don't, from my mind, like somehow having the two together versus them being like, I don't know, separated as like different things, because they almost seem like the same thing, but it's like, what is the impact? And then one could be something bad's not going to happen, and the other could be something, there'd be a positive outcome. But I really appreciate this work because I think it will help us make better long-term decisions. So thanks for organizing it this way, and I think it will be a very helpful tool for the board, not just this year, but as we move forward.
Thank you, and apologies, Commissioner Brennan, in other words, I forgot you were also on that budget.
That's okay.
Or else I would have said something. Commissioner Singleton.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you all for the work and the conversations I feel like we regularly have when we have check-ins. Director, that's always really helpful. I just quickly on the slides, while you were speaking, Director, there were some projects that you said, oh, we actually need to put $7 million in the FY27. I'm unclear if then Eric's slides are missing those dollars as well.
No, I think Eric's slides had them except for the Hanson project, right? And we just had different iterations of the slides going, trying to produce the deck differently, and in the last minute, put the wrong one in.
That's fine.
But the two that were missing were the Profit Center, which Eric had included, he just shifted it out, and Hanson was missing from both. And we just,
Okay.
yeah.
Could we just get, I use these, so
Yes.
it would be helpful if we could just get these updated with just the ones that are
Yeah,
tables.
we have them updated
Awesome.
already.
Thank you.
Sorry to interrupt, but could you make sure the board clerk gets those too, so that we can update it on the meeting materials for today too?
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I also want to talk a little bit about the scoring. I will say the questions in equity are a little confusing to me in how the county talks about equity. I know it's hard to think about equity when it comes to capital and infrastructure, but that was my job for a couple of years. It's possible. How come we're not using the equity and empowerment lens that is the county's equity tool?
We use it in different ways. I think we tried to lift, in general, from that to apply it in this particular scenario.
I would love to do some follow-up on it. I think it's not there yet.
Okay.
As far as how we as a county define equity, this doesn't quite get there, and I think you'd see some really different scores on the projects if this matched more how the county talks about equity and what's in that equity and empowerment lens tool. This is likely not a you all question, but Chair, you may know. What, if any, are impacts of the conversations at Metro around the RIF changes of funding as we're using those dollars to pay for implementation of the new HMIS? I'm a little concerned if that funding is going to actually remain.
Yeah, so the latest conversation I had around the plans for the RIF funding is that there's going to be some guidance, suggestion of looking at what would happen if this were to go to Metro, but that's further out in the future and shouldn't affect things for next year. Yeah. However, it is a very important conversation that we all should be weighing in on, because it does have impacts, direct impacts to some of the things that we and other counties are doing like this.
Absolutely, and it's the way that we get, it's not just Multnomah County paying for it, it's the region paying for a regional database, and that's really important. The one piece, I'll just say, the DCHS workflow software, I feel like that relates to our conversation in the last presentation of it's not just that department that needs that kind of how do we de-silo, it's actually across the enterprise. And I worry that we're not having that conversation. We still have the inability to tell if somebody is a client of multiple departments within the county.
Yeah, Commissioner Singleton, that's a good observation. We are having those conversations with each of the departments. I think the hard part right now is just getting down to what are the ultimate requirements that are needed, but the conversations are happening for sure. Be happy to talk about that in more detail with you if you'd like to know about that.
I absolutely would. Okay. It's the bane of my existence that nobody can tell me if they share clients at all. So thank you, I'll follow up.
Okay.
And just briefly, I'm curious if there'll be any, and this doesn't have to be today, but as the DCJ project moves forward, my understanding is it would be to move some staff who are in other sites, and so wanting to understand the cost savings when that project's complete and what that kind of return on investment will be for those. And then just lastly, I want to appreciate Director Massey, the conversations we've had about vector control. That has been, I know, complicated and a little all over the place, but it's so critical. And I think as we saw with ongoing climate change this year, it's going to be a critical component of managing our invasive species. The other thing I want to highlight, of course, is Walnut Park, and I appreciate, Eric, you talking about not getting to a full projected cost estimate, and I think particularly because this project is designed to be a different way of the county doing business, that engagement with community has to happen as a part of what even's going to be in the building before we can get to projecting what the cost would be. So I really look forward to that work moving forward, and I know how important it is in the Black community. Almost any event I go to, somebody asks me about Walnut Park and will they be engaged, and let's make sure the Urban League Senior Center is still a part of this building, and I assure them that we will engage thoroughly with them, with our private sector partners on this. So I also just want to highlight that that project is a really cool way that the county can really participate in economic development activities by bringing our resources to the table to leverage with public investment. So thank you for all the work. I know you all are grinding away on getting that all executed and moving forward. So appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Moyer.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the briefing. That was very helpful. As we look at some of these priorities and some of the bigger capital projects that may require financing, when we go out for whatever form of financing we would consider, do we ever bundle multiple projects into the same general obligation bond, or can you do a levy that does multiple projects for multiple departments? What options do we have for combining, or are they standalone? How does that work?
Yeah, Commissioner, you can definitely combine. Recently, I don't remember a county geo bond that did a bundle, but doesn't mean you can't do that. When we did the 2017 debt issuance with full faith and credit, there was various components. There was the courthouse, there was a health department headquarters, and there's a DCJ building, I can't forget the name of terminology, and then there was the ERP, the Workday implementation. So that was a combination of various projects into one debt issuance. So you can't do it, and again, you can do it for general obligations bonds, but we haven't, at least in recent times, haven't done that. I think obviously when you go out to the voters, it creates the complexity of describing multiple components and ask to the voters, but you definitely can, and there's been other jurisdictions that have done that historically.
Can you bring something to the voters that would be the funding, so a revenue bond or something, that is not property tax? Like, so could we identify a different revenue stream and potentially bond again? Like, I don't know, I'm making this up. Some kind of transaction tax, or I don't know. I'm just asking, like, does it have to be property? Is that specific to property taxes, or?
The revenue bond? Yeah, no, it doesn't have to be specific to the property taxes. In most cases, it's not. It has to be a revenue source that I think in our case, I think would be probably new. And it has to be a stable revenue source that is, that doesn't have an endpoint, I think. And you could bond against it using your traditional revenue bonds. I think I referenced it in the slides, but I think the most common one is a utility fee or tolling. where you do that. But again, the county hasn't done that in a long time.
As we're looking at kind of our portfolio for office-related spaces, how is that being impacted by the work that's being done, looking at our existing footprint and utilization and work from home? Like, I just want to make sure that we're planning for the right size and not overbuilding.
Yeah, Commissioner Moyer, the way we go about it is ensuring that we have just the most up-to-date information. So, for example, the most work right now is including the departments and groups that are downtown. With that, we finished a report a year and a half ago. We're going back to the departments to refresh the work, to understand how have work schedules changed, if at all, and will they change, particularly with Department of County Human Services and the Health Department that are in Gladys McCoy and Five Oak, and DCJ that's in the Mead Building. So when we do come to the board with either a proposed project in an acquired building or a proposed lease, we will ideally have really good up-to-date information. The challenge, of course, is sometimes things change pretty quickly. So we will have to determine if we're going to be conservative with our space estimates or not, and talk to you all about that.
And I think that's all my questions. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you again for this. I think this is both, I mean, it's really important for us to get a sense of the amount of need in terms of our oh, I'm so sorry. Commissioner Jones-Dixon.
When you go opposite.
I know when I go, it does. I forget, sometimes I forget to loop back around.
Just want to flag, in the spirit of adding things to the list, just the East County Resource Center. It's not on the list, but it's something that we'll likely be bringing forward we've identified that as a need. So just wanted to put that on the record. And again, thank you for the recommendations and for the presentation. It was insightful and helpful.
Thank you, Commissioner. So I think that this is a really important thing, especially right now. As we heard very clearly in Eric's presentation, there is not the amount of general fund one-time only that we've experienced in past years. And if you look at all the way down to Tier 4, we are significantly, we need significant amounts of money to do everything on that list. That's why the prioritization is so important. And to Commissioner Singleton's, questions about the equity and some of the decision-making processes. I mean, I remember, again, for years, we have been working to improve this prioritization process and balancing out all of the different pieces that need to be. And so I want to just appreciate the continuous improvement that's gone on. And this is a kind of a living thing, and taking the feedback of this board as we're trying to figure out what's the right way to prioritize these competing projects is going to be an important conversation going forward, because we are going to have to make hard decisions. We're going to have to think creatively about how we are going to fund these things. We're going to have to be strategic about this. I think that, we know that some of these projects are continuations of commitments we've made, like the Sobering and Crisis Stabilization Center, but also, the projects like vector control that just kind of pop up not being expected, and yet we do have to respond to that because they are providing critical services for our community. And then, things like the IGA that we have on the bus stop project, which it feels like has also been going on as long as I've been at the county. So,
This is my first votes.
So anyway, I just want to really, appreciate all the work that's done into this. There are some exciting projects here. There's some must-do projects on here. And I think I look forward to the way that this information will help the board make some really important decisions going forward. So thank you so much, everyone, for this. That concludes our agenda for today. Our next meeting is scheduled for Thursday, March 12th at 9:30 a.m. There being no further business, we are adjourned.